The rain fell in sheets across the dusty street of Glenrio, New Mexico, turning the packed earth into a river of mud as Isabella Tucker watched from beneath the overhang of the mercantile. His hat pulled low against the downpour that had started without warning on this August afternoon in 1883. He had ridden into town expecting the usual dry heat of the high plains, not this deluge that seemed determined to wash away every trace of summer dust, and certainly not expecting to see a young woman standing in the middle of the street with a wicker basket clutched to her chest, rain streaming down her face as she held up pieces of bread, wrapped in cloth to the few hurried passers-by who ignored her completely. The sight struck him harder than any bullet he had ever dodged. She wore a simple blue dress that clung to her frame from the rain, her dark hair plastered to her face and neck, but she stood with a dignity that the weather could not diminish. She called out in a voice barely audible over the drumming rain, offering her bread to anyone who would listen. But the street was emptying fast as people sought shelter from the storm. Isabella had seen many things in his 32 years, had ridden cattle trails from Texas to Montana, had faced down rustlers and survived stampedes. But something about this woman standing alone in the rain selling bread touched a place in his chest he thought had gone numb years ago. He stepped off the wooden walkway into the mud, his boots sinking immediately as he crossed the street toward her. The rain soaked through his shirt in seconds, but he barely noticed. As he approached, she turned toward him, and he saw her eyes were the color of honey, bright despite the gray curtain of rain between them. She held up a piece of bread automatically, her voice practiced but tired. "Fresh bread, sir, baked this morning, only 5 cents a loaf." Isabella looked down at the basket. Even through the rain, he could see perhaps 24 wrapped loaves, their cloth coverings darkening with moisture. He pulled his wallet from his vest pocket, grateful he had stopped at the bank earlier and counted out bills. "I will take all of it," he said, his voice rougher than he intended. She blinked water from her eyes, confusion crossing her features. "Sir, the whole basket. How much for everything?" Her lips parted slightly in surprise, and he noticed they were turning blue from the cold despite it being August. The rain must have been coming down from the mountains, carrying winter's memory with it. She looked down at her basket, seemed to count quickly in her head, then looked back up at him with uncertainty written across her delicate features. "That would be $3, but sir, surely you do not need this much bread." Isabella held out $5. "3 for the bread, 2 for you standing out here in this storm. Now please, let us get you somewhere dry before you catch your death." She stared at the money as if it were a mirage, and he realized she probably had not made $5 in a week, maybe longer. Her hand trembled slightly as she reached for the bills, and whether from cold or emotion, he could not tell. She took the money carefully, tucked it somewhere in her soaked dress, and handed him the basket with both hands. "Thank you," she whispered, and the genuine gratitude in those 2 words told him volumes about her circumstances. "What is your name?" Isabella asked, water running off the brim of his hat. Delilah Grant." "Isabella Tucker." "And you should not be out here in weather like this, Miss Grant." "I have to sell the bread," she said simply, as if that explained everything, and perhaps it did. "My mother, she is sick. The doctor wants payment and the medicine costs money we do not have." The pieces fell into place with painful clarity. Isabella glanced around the nearly empty street, at the few remaining people hurrying for cover. No one was going to buy bread in this downpour. She would have stood here until nightfall if he had not come along, hoping against hope that someone would stop. "Where do you live?" he asked. Delilah pointed toward the edge of town, where a cluster of small houses sat near the railroad tracks. "The yellow house with the broken fence." "But, sir, you do not need to worry about me. You have already been more than kind." Isabella hefted the basket under one arm and gestured with his other hand toward the nearest building, which happened to be the Silver Star Hotel. "Miss Grant, I insist you get inside and warm yourself. At least have some coffee before you go home. Consider it part of the transaction." She looked like she wanted to refuse, but another gust of wind-driven rain made the decision for her. She nodded and let him guide her toward the hotel entrance. The warmth hit them immediately as they stepped inside, and Isabella saw her shiver violently as her body registered the temperature change. The lobby was modest but clean, with a few chairs arranged near a fireplace where flames crackled cheerfully. The desk clerk looked up from his newspaper, taking in their soaked appearance with mild interest. "Need a room?" he asked Isabella. "Coffee for the lady, please, and a blanket if you have one to spare." The clerk nodded and disappeared into a back room. Isabella set the basket down and pulled one of the chairs closer to the fire, then gestured for Delilah to sit. She did so hesitantly, her hands immediately reaching toward the warmth. He could see her more clearly now in the firelight. She was young, perhaps 22 or 23, with a face that would have been beautiful if not drawn with exhaustion and worry. Her dress, though wet and simple, was clean and carefully mended in several places. Everything about her spoke of poverty faced with dignity. The clerk returned with 2 tin cups of coffee and a wool blanket. Isabella paid him and wrapped the blanket around Delilah's shoulders before taking the other chair. She clutched the coffee cup with both hands, letting the steam rise into her face. "Thank you, Mr. Tucker," she said quietly. "You did not have to do any of this. My mother would have skinned me alive if I left a lady standing in the rain," Isabella said, which was true enough, though his mother had been dead for 10 years now. "Tell me about your situation, if you do not mind my asking." Delilah took a small sip of coffee, and some color began to return to her cheeks. She stared into the fire as she spoke, her voice low but steady. "My mother and I came to Glenrio 3 years ago after my father died. He worked on the railroad, and there was an accident near Amarillo. They gave us a little money, enough to get here and rent the house. Mother took in sewing and washing, and I helped her. Then last winter she got sick. It started as a cough, but it never went away. The doctor says it is in her lungs, that she needs rest and medicine and good food, but all of that costs money we do not have." She paused, took another sip of coffee, and continued. "I learned to bake from my grandmother before she passed. Mother used to be able to help me, but now she is too weak. I bake at night when the oven is cooler and cheaper to run, then sell during the day. Most days I make enough for the rent and a little food. But the doctor wants to be paid, and the medicine, it costs 50 cents a bottle, and she needs a new bottle every week." Isabella did the arithmetic in his head. If she made $3 on a very good day selling bread, and had to cover rent, food, and medicine, she was operating on the thinnest of margins. One bad day could mean disaster. 1 week of rain could mean losing everything. "You have no other family?" he asked. Delilah shook her head. "My father was an only child, and his parents died before I was born. My mother has a sister somewhere in Kansas, but they have not spoken in years. We wrote to her when Mother got sick, but never received a reply. And you do this alone, the baking, the selling, caring for your mother. There is no one else." She said it matter-of-factly, without self-pity, which somehow made it worse. "But I manage. We manage." Isabella leaned back in his chair, studying her profile in the firelight. She had stopped shivering now, and the blanket had absorbed most of the water from her hair. There was something remarkable about her resilience, the quiet strength in the set of her shoulders, despite everything life had thrown at her. He had known plenty of people who would have given up, or turn to darker means of survival under similar circumstances. Delilah Grant baked bread and sold it in the rain. "How much do you owe the doctor?" he found himself asking. She looked at him then, wariness flickering in those honey-colored eyes. "Mr. Tucker, you have already been far too generous. I cannot accept charity beyond what you have already given." "I am not offering charity. I am asking a question." Delilah bit her lip, clearly torn between pride and necessity. Necessity won, as it usually did. $16. He has been patient, but he says he cannot wait much longer. If we do not pay soon, he will not come when Mother needs him. $16 might as well have been 16,000 for someone in her position. Isabella reached for his wallet again, but her hand shot out and caught his wrist. Her grip was surprisingly strong. "No," she said firmly. "I will not take more of your money. You have already bought bread you do not need. I will not become a beggar. You are not begging, I am offering. And I am refusing." Her eyes met his steadily. "I appreciate your kindness, Mr. Tucker. Truly I do, but I will find a way to pay the doctor myself. I always do." There was steel in her voice despite its softness, and Isabella found himself respecting her even more. Pride was often all people in poverty had left, and she wore hers like armor. He withdrew his wallet slowly, but instead of taking out more money, he pulled out a business card, one of the few he carried. It listed his name and the Double T Ranch in Key County, about 40 miles north of Glenrio. "At least take this," he said, offering her the card. "If you ever need help, genuine help, you can find me there. I run cattle, and there is always work for someone willing to do it. Cooking, mending, whatever skills you have could be useful." Delilah took the card carefully, studying it in the firelight. "You would offer work to a stranger." "You are not a stranger anymore, Miss Grant, and I am a decent judge of character. Anyone willing to stand in a storm to sell bread rather than give up is someone I would trust on my property." She tucked the card inside her dress, somewhere near where she had put the money. "Thank you. I will remember that." They sat in companionable silence for a while, drinking their coffee and listening to the rain drum against the hotel windows. Isabella found himself reluctant to leave, which was unusual for him. He had been alone for so long that he had grown comfortable with his own company, preferring the open range and the simple loyalty of his horses to the complications of human relationships. But something about Delilah Grant made him want to stay, to learn more about her, to help shoulder some of the burden she carried alone. Finally, the rain began to ease, shifting from a downpour to a steady drizzle. Delilah finished her coffee and stood, folding the blanket carefully and setting it on the chair. "I should go home," she said. "Mother will worry if I am gone too long." Isabella stood as well. "At least let me walk you there. The streets will be a mess." "You have done enough, Mr. Tucker. I have a basket of bread I need to figure out what to do with. Perhaps your mother would like some, fresh from the baker herself." A small smile touched her lips, the first he had seen, and it transformed her face completely. "You are persistent. So I have been told." They left the hotel together, Isabella carrying the basket under one arm. The rain had indeed slowed, but the streets were ankle-deep in mud and water. He offered her his free arm, and after a moment's hesitation, she took it. They walked carefully through town, her directions leading them toward the railroad tracks and the cluster of houses she had indicated earlier. The neighborhood was poor, that much was immediately obvious. The houses were small and weathered, some missing shingles or sporting cracked windows. But many had small gardens out front, and laundry hung on lines despite the rain, speaking to the determination of people making the best of hard circumstances. The yellow house with the broken fence was one of the smaller ones, but its windows were clean and someone had planted flowers along the front path. Mother loves flowers, Delilah said, noticing where he was looking. She cannot tend them anymore, so I try to keep them alive for her. She led him up the path to the front door, which she opened without a key. Inside was dim and smelled faintly of bread and medicine. The front room was tiny, with a small sofa and a single chair, both worn but clean. A doorway led to what must have been a bedroom, and Isabella could see a figure lying in bed, covered with quilts despite the summer heat. "Delilah, is that you?" The voice was weak but warm. "Yes, Mother, I am home, and I brought a guest." Isabella stayed by the door as Delilah moved to the bedroom. He heard low conversation, then Delilah returned and gestured for him to come closer. He set the basket on a small table and approached the bedroom doorway. The woman in the bed had clearly once been beautiful, and traces of it remained despite the ravages of illness. Her hair, the same dark shade as Delilah's, was streaked with gray and spread across the pillow. Her face was thin, almost translucent, and her breathing had an audible rattle to it. But her eyes, when they focused on Isabella, were bright with intelligence and warmth. "Mother, this is Mr. Isabella Tucker. He bought all my bread today and insisted on seeing me home safely." "That was very kind of you, Mr. Tucker." The woman's voice was barely above a whisper. "Please forgive me for not rising to greet you properly." "No need for formalities, madam," Isabella said, removing his hat. "I'm just glad I happened by when I did. Your daughter makes excellent bread, by the way." A small smile crossed the woman's face. "She gets that from her grandmother. I could never master the art myself. Everything I touched turned to bricks." She coughed then, a deep, rattling sound that went on too long. Delilah was at her side immediately with a glass of water and a spoonful of dark liquid that must have been the medicine she had mentioned. Isabella watched as Delilah tended to her mother with practiced efficiency, adjusting pillows and smoothing the quilts. The love between them was palpable, a tangible thing that filled the small room. When the coughing fit subsided, the older woman lay back exhausted, and Delilah gently wiped her face with a damp cloth. "I should let you rest," Isabella said quietly. "It was a pleasure to meet you, madam. And you, Mr. Tucker, thank you for helping my daughter." Delilah walked him back to the door. At the threshold, Isabella paused, choosing his words carefully. "Miss Grant, my offer of work stands. And if you find yourself in need before you can make that journey, the bank in town knows me. You can leave word there, and I check in every few weeks." "You are a good man, Isabella Tucker," Delilah said softly. "I hope life treats you kindly. And you, Miss Grant." He put his hat back on and stepped out into the drizzle, already planning his next move. The seed of an idea had taken root in his mind, but he needed to think it through carefully. Isabella had learned long ago that sometimes the universe put people in your path for a reason, and he had a feeling that Delilah Grant was one of those people. Over the next 3 weeks, Isabella found himself returning to Glenrio more often than necessary. He told himself it was to check on supplies for the ranch, to meet with potential buyers for his cattle, to visit the bank, but the truth was simpler and more complicated. He wanted to see Delilah again. Each time he rode into town, he looked for her on the streets with her basket, and more often than not, he found her. He never bought all her bread again, sensing that she would refuse such obvious charity a second time, but he always bought a few loaves and stayed to talk if she had time. He learned that she loved reading but rarely had money for books, that she had wanted to be a teacher before her father died, that her favorite color was green because it reminded her of the forests in Missouri where she had been born. He told her about the ranch, about his years on the cattle trails, about his dream of building something lasting and good. Sometimes he found her at the general store, buying flour and yeast, and he would carry her purchases home for her. Other times he brought things that might help. A warm shawl he claimed his ranch cook had left behind. A book he said he had already read, fresh vegetables from a garden he insisted was overproducing. Delilah accepted these gifts with reluctant grace, her pride warring with her practical nature. On one particularly hot September afternoon, Isabella arrived in town to find Delilah's usual corner empty. Concern flared immediately in his chest. He asked at the mercantile and learned that no one had seen her that day. Without questioning his urgency, he rode straight to the yellow house with the broken fence. He knocked on the door and waited. When no answer came, he knocked again, louder. Finally, he heard shuffling steps and the door opened to reveal Delilah. She looked exhausted, her hair disheveled and her eyes red-rimmed. "Mr. Tucker," she said, surprise evident in her voice. "I apologize. I was not expecting visitors. Is everything all right? You were not in town today." She hesitated, and he saw her shoulders sag slightly. "Mother had a bad night. The coughing was worse than usual. I did not feel I could leave her alone today." "May I come in?" Delilah stepped aside, and Isabella entered the small house. It was even hotter inside than out, the air close and still. He could hear labored breathing from the bedroom. "Has the doctor been by?" he asked. "Not yet. I sent word this morning, but he has other patients. He will come when he can." "And the medicine?" Delilah's expression answered before her words did. "We ran out yesterday. I was going to buy more today, but I needed to sell first to have the money." Isabella felt something tighten in his chest. The woman was dying in the next room, and her daughter could not afford medicine because she had to sell bread to earn money to buy medicine, but could not sell bread because she had to stay home with her dying mother. The circular logic of poverty, crushing and inescapable. He pulled out his wallet without asking permission this time. "Where is the pharmacy?" "Mr. Tucker, no." "Where is the pharmacy, Delilah?" She stared at him, and he watched the internal struggle play across her face. Pride versus love. Independence versus necessity. Finally, love won as he had known it would. "Next to the telegraph office. Ask for Dr. Morrison's tonic, but I will pay you back every cent, I swear it. We can discuss terms later. Right now I am getting that medicine." He was back within 20 minutes, having also stopped at the doctor's office to convey in no uncertain terms that Mrs. Grant needed attention immediately. The doctor, an older man with tired eyes, had promised to be there within the hour. Delilah was sitting beside her mother's bed when he returned, holding a damp cloth to the woman's forehead. Mrs. Grant's breathing had worsened, each inhale a struggle. Isabella handed Delilah the brown bottle, and she immediately measured out a dose and helped her mother take it. Then they waited. The medicine worked slowly but visibly. After about 10 minutes, Mrs. Grant's breathing eased slightly, and she slipped into what looked like actual sleep rather than unconsciousness. Delilah sagged with relief, and Isabella gently guided her out of the bedroom and into the front room where she collapsed onto the sofa. "You need to rest," he said. "You are exhausted." "I cannot. What if she needs me? Then I will wake you." "But you are no good to her if you collapse from exhaustion." Delilah looked up at him with those honey-colored eyes, and he saw something shift in her expression. Walls that had been firmly in place began to crack. "Why are you doing this?" she whispered. "Why do you keep coming back, keep helping?" "What do you want from me?" Isabella sat down in the chair across from her, his hat in his hands. He had been asking himself the same question for 3 weeks now, and the answer had crystallized slowly, like frost forming on a window. "I want nothing from you except perhaps your company," he said honestly. "I come back because, when I saw you standing in that rain, selling bread with such dignity and determination, something in me recognized something in you. I have spent most of my life alone, Miss Grant." building a ranch, working cattle, focused on survival and success. Somewhere along the way, I forgot that there might be more to life than that. You reminded me. Tears spilled down her cheeks, and she did not wipe them away. I cannot give you what you deserve, Mr. Tucker. I am tied to this house, to my mother. I have nothing to offer. You have already given me more than you know. He leaned forward, his voice earnest. Let me help you, not as charity, but as what I hope might become friendship and perhaps someday something more. She shook her head, but not in refusal, more in wonder. You are either the kindest man I have ever met or the most foolish. Perhaps both. A sound somewhere between a laugh and a sob escaped her. I do not even know what to say. Say you will let me help. Say that when the doctor comes, you will let me pay him what is owed. Say that you will not face this alone anymore. Delilah looked toward the bedroom where her mother slept, then back at Isabella. He could see the moment she made her decision, saw the relief and fear and gratitude all mixed together in her expression. All right, she whispered. All right. The doctor arrived as promised, examined Mrs. Grant thoroughly, and confirmed what they both already knew. The illness was advanced, and without better care, she did not have long. He wrote out instructions for the medicine, recommended a diet of broth and soft foods, and suggested someone sit with her through the nights to monitor her breathing. When Isabella paid him the $16 owed plus another $10 for future visits, the doctor's relief was evident. After he left, Isabella found Delilah in the kitchen, staring at nothing. He stood in the doorway, unsure whether his presence was welcome or intrusive. Thank you, she said without turning around. I know I keep saying it, but I do not know what else to say. You have given me hope when I had none left. You never lost hope. You just needed someone to help you carry the burden of it. She turned then, and he saw that her face was wet with fresh tears. I am so tired, Isabella, so very tired. He crossed the room in 3 strides and pulled her into his arms without thinking. She stiffened for just a moment, then melted against him, her hands clutching the back of his shirt as she finally let herself break down. He held her while she cried, feeling the weight of all those months of struggle and fear pouring out. His own eyes stung, moved by her pain and the trust she was showing him. When the storm passed, she pulled back slightly, wiping her face with her hands. I apologize. I do not usually fall apart like that. You are allowed to fall apart. You have been strong for long enough. She laughed softly, the sound watery but genuine. You keep saying things that make it very difficult to maintain proper distance. Then perhaps you should stop trying to maintain distance. Delilah looked up at him, and something electric passed between them. Her lips parted slightly, and Isabella felt his breath catch. But before anything could happen, Mrs. Grant coughed from the bedroom and the moment broke. Delilah stepped away, smoothing her hair and composing herself. I should check on her, of course. Over the following weeks, Isabella became a fixture at the Yellow House. He hired a woman from town to sit with Mrs. Grant during the days so Delilah could continue baking and selling bread, though he also brought supplies from the ranch that supplemented their income. He fixed the broken fence, patched the roof where it leaked, and reinforced the front steps that had been threatening to collapse. Delilah protested each improvement, but less and less as time went on. They fell into a routine of sorts. Isabella would arrive in late afternoon after his ranch work was done, and they would sit together in the front room while Mrs. Grant slept. They talked about everything and nothing, their conversations ranging from philosophy to the price of cattle. He brought her books from his small collection, and she read to him in the evenings, her voice soothing after long days of hard work. The attraction between them grew steadily, undeniable but unspoken. Isabella had never been a man comfortable with romantic gestures or flowery words, but he found himself wanting to be better for her, to learn how to express what he felt. And Delilah, despite her exhaustion and worry, bloomed under his attention. She smiled more, laughed at his dry humor, and sometimes he would catch her watching him with an expression that made his heart race. One October evening, after Mrs. Grant had been settled for the night, Delilah walked Isabella out to where his horse was tied. The air had turned crisp with the promise of autumn, and stars blazed overhead in the clear desert sky. "Isabella," she said, using his first name for perhaps the third time ever, "I need to tell you something." He turned to face her, reading the nervousness in her posture. "What is it?" "I have been thinking about what you said, about friendship and perhaps something more. I need you to understand something before this goes any further." "All right." She took a breath, gathering her courage. "My mother is dying. We both know it, even if we do not say it aloud. When she goes, I will have nothing. No family, no savings, no prospects. I will be a poor woman alone in a world that is not kind to poor women alone. If you are staying out of some sense of obligation or pity, please tell me now. I could not bear to lose you later when you realize what a burden I would be." Isabella reached out and took her hands in his. They were rough from work, the hands of someone who had never had an easy life, and they felt perfect in his own calloused palms. "Delilah Grant, I am going to say this once, and I need you to hear it clearly. I am not here out of pity or obligation. I am here because, from the moment I saw you standing in that rain, you have occupied my thoughts in a way no one has before. You are brave and strong and kind, and somehow, despite everything life has thrown at you, you have not let it make you bitter or cruel. I admire you, I respect you, and I have fallen completely, irrevocably in love with you." Her eyes widened, reflecting the starlight. "You love me, yes. And if you will have me when the time is right, I would like to court you properly. I would like to take you to the ranch and show you the land. I would like to build a life with you, but all of that can wait. Right now, I just want you to know that you are not alone and you never will be again if I have anything to say about it." A tear slid down her cheek, but she was smiling. "Isabella Tucker, you are absolutely the most foolish man I have ever met." His heart sank. "I see, and I love you for it." Her smile widened. "I love you. I think I have loved you since you bought all my bread and insisted on buying me coffee. How could I not love someone who sees me not as a burden or a charity case, but as someone worth knowing?" Isabella felt like he could not breathe properly, like the stars overhead had suddenly gotten brighter. "You love me." "Yes, you ridiculous, wonderful man, I love you." He kissed her then, unable to help himself. It was clumsy and perfect, their first kiss under the October stars, and when they pulled apart, both were smiling like fools. "Come to the ranch this Sunday," he said. "Bring your mother if she is well enough, or come alone if she is not. I want you to see it, to see what our life could look like." "Our life," Delilah repeated wonderingly. "I like the sound of that." Sunday arrived with the kind of perfect autumn weather that made the desert beautiful. Mrs. Grant was having a good day, relatively speaking, and insisted that Delilah go to the ranch without her. The woman who sat with her during the week came by to stay for the day, and Isabella drove up in a wagon rather than on horseback, making the journey easier for Delilah. The ride to the Double T Ranch took about 2 hours, following roads that wound through stunning landscape. The high plains stretched in every direction, dotted with juniper and pinyon pine, and in the distance, mesas rose like monuments against the bright blue sky. Isabella pointed out landmarks, talking about the land and the cattle and his plans for the future. When they crested the final hill and the ranch came into view, Delilah drew in a sharp breath. It was modest by some standards but substantial enough, with a main house, a barn, corrals, and several outbuildings. The house itself was built of adobe and wood, with a wide porch that wrapped around 3 sides. Someone had planted trees around it, still young but growing, and there was even a small vegetable garden. "It is beautiful," Delilah said softly. "It is home," Isabella replied. "Or it could be, for both of us." He helped her down from the wagon, and they walked up to the house together. Inside was more spacious than her little house in Glenrio, with a large main room that served as kitchen and living area, 2 bedrooms, and even a small study. The furniture was simple but well made, and everything was surprisingly clean for a bachelor's home. "I have a woman come from the neighboring ranch once a week to clean," Isabella explained, seeing her look around. "Her name is Maria, and she is a force of nature. She has been after me for years to find a wife so she can stop worrying about me." Delilah laughed. "I think I would like to meet her." They spent the afternoon walking the property. Isabella showed her the barn where he kept his horses, introduced her to the handful of ranch hands who worked for him, and took her up to a spot on a nearby hill where the view stretched for miles in every direction. They sat together on a flat rock, her hand in his, and watched the shadows lengthen across the land. "I could be happy here," Delilah said quietly. "I can see it so clearly, waking up to these views, building a life in that house, being with you." "Then that is what we will do," Isabella said. "However long it takes, whatever needs to happen, that is what we will build together." "My mother would like you," she said, leaning her head against his shoulder. "She has been worried about what will happen to me after she is gone. If she knew I had you, she could rest easier." "Then we should tell her." Delilah lifted her head to look at him. "Tell her what exactly?" Isabella reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. Delilah's eyes went wide as he opened it to reveal a simple gold band with a small but genuine diamond. "Delilah Grant, I know we have known each other for only a short time by conventional standards, but I also know that I have never been more certain of anything in my life. I love you. I want to build a life with you, to face whatever comes together. Will you marry me?" Tears streamed down her face, but she was laughing. "Yes, yes, Isabella, I will marry you." He slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, which felt like a sign from the universe. They kissed there on the hilltop as the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, and Isabella felt a sense of completeness he had never experienced before. They returned to Glenrio as darkness fell, both reluctant to end the day but knowing Mrs. Grant would be waiting. When they entered the house, they found her awake and alert, sitting up in bed with extra pillows behind her back. She took one look at their faces and smiled. "Something has changed," she said knowingly. Delilah sat on the edge of the bed and took her mother's hand. "Mama, Isabella has asked me to marry him, and I said yes." Mrs. Grant's eyes filled with tears, but they were tears of joy. She reached out with her other hand toward Isabella, who stepped closer and took it. Her grip was weak but warm. "You will take care of her?" Mrs. Grant asked. "With my life," Isabella promised. "She will never want for anything I can provide. And you will let her take care of you. My daughter needs to feel useful, to feel valued for more than just what she can do for others. I promise that as well. She will be my partner in all things." Mrs. Grant nodded, satisfied. She looked at Delilah again, cupping her daughter's face with one thin hand. "I can go peacefully now, knowing you will be all right. You will be loved and cared for. That is all a mother could hope for." "Do not talk about going, Mama," Delilah said, her voice breaking. "Not tonight. Tonight, let us just be happy together." And they were. They sat together in the small bedroom, the three of them, and talked about the future. Mrs. Grant wanted to hear about the ranch, about the house, about what kind of wedding they would have. Isabella described it all, painting pictures with words of the life he and Delilah would build. The older woman listened with a peaceful expression. and Isabella realized she was not mourning what she would miss, but celebrating what her daughter had found. As the night deepened, Mrs. Grant grew tired and Delilah helped her lie back down. Isabella prepared to leave, but Mrs. Grant called him back to her bedside. "Thank you," she whispered, "for seeing her when others looked away, for loving her not despite her circumstances but including all of them. You are a rare man, Isabella Tucker." "I am just a man who got lucky enough to be in the right place at the right time," he replied. "No," Mrs. Grant said firmly. "Many men walked past her in that rain. You were the one who stopped. That says everything about who you are, Mrs. Grant passed away 3 weeks later, on a quiet November morning with Delilah holding her hand. It was peaceful in the end, her breathing simply stopping as if she had decided it was time to rest. Delilah grieved deeply, but not without hope, and Isabella was there for every moment, holding her through the tears and helping arrange the simple funeral. They buried Mrs. Grant in the Glenrio cemetery on a hillside with a view of the desert she had come to love. The headstone Isabella paid for was modest but well carved, listing her name, her dates, and the inscription, "Beloved Mother and Friend." A surprising number of people came to the service, women who had known her from the sewing and washing she had taken in, neighbors who had appreciated her kindness despite her poverty. Delilah seemed moved by the turnout, realizing perhaps for the first time how much her mother had meant to the community. After the funeral, there was the matter of the house and its contents. The landlord was understanding when Delilah explained she would be leaving, and even returned part of the last month's rent since she was vacating early. They packed up the few possessions worth keeping, and Isabella arranged for them to be transported to the ranch. Everything else they sold or gave away to those who needed it more. On Delilah's last night in the yellow house, they sat together in the empty front room, their voices echoing slightly in the bare space. "I thought I would be sadder," Delilah admitted. "This has been my home for 3 years. But all I feel is ready to move forward." "Your mother would approve," Isabella said. "I know she would. She told me the night before she died that I should not waste time grieving when I had so much life ahead of me. She made me promise to be happy." "Then that is what we will do. We will be happy." They were married on a Sunday in early December in the small church in Glenrio. It was a simple ceremony with few guests, but those who came were important. The ranch hands attended, along with Maria, the woman who cleaned Isabella's house and who had indeed been delighted to learn he was finally getting married. The doctor came, and the mercantile owner, and a few of the women who had bought bread from Delilah over the months. Even the hotel clerk who had brought them coffee that rainy day made an appearance. Delilah wore a simple dress of deep green, the color she had once told Isabella was her favorite. She had sewn it herself from fabric he had bought her, and she looked more beautiful than he had ever seen her. When she walked down the short aisle to stand beside him, he had to blink back unexpected tears. The ceremony itself was brief and traditional. They exchanged vows, speaking clearly and firmly about love and loyalty and partnership. Isabella slipped a second ring, a wedding band, onto her finger next to the engagement ring. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Isabella kissed her with all the love and promise he could convey, and the small crowd applauded. The celebration afterward was held at the hotel where they had first shared coffee, the owner having cleared the dining room for the occasion. There was food and music, and for a few hours, Delilah laughed and danced without the weight of worry on her shoulders. Isabella watched her with wonder, seeing glimpses of the carefree young woman she might have been if life had been kinder earlier. As the evening wound down, they said their goodbyes and climbed into the wagon for the ride back to the ranch. It was their ranch now, their home. Delilah sat close to Isabella on the wagon seat, her head resting against his shoulder as the horse followed the familiar path through the darkness. "What are you thinking?" Isabella asked softly. "That a year ago, I could never have imagined this. I was so focused on surviving, on getting through each day, that I could not see past the next obstacle. And now here I am, married to a wonderful man, heading toward a future that feels full of possibility. It is almost too much to believe." "Believe it," Isabella said, kissing the top of her head. "This is real. We are real. I love you, Isabella Tucker." "And I love you, Delilah Tucker." The sound of her new name made them both smile. Delilah Tucker. It sounded right, like it had always been meant to be. Their first months of marriage were an adjustment, but a joyful one. Delilah threw herself into making the ranch house a home, adding small touches that transformed it from a bachelor's practical space to something warmer and more welcoming. She sewed curtains for the windows, planted flowers around the porch, and reorganized the kitchen to suit her needs. She also took over the cooking, which the ranch hands celebrated enthusiastically after years of their own mediocre attempts. Isabella, for his part, learned to share his space and his life after years of solitude. It was not always easy. He was set in his ways, used to making decisions alone and keeping his own counsel. But Delilah was patient with him, and he discovered that consulting with her, including her in plans and decisions, made everything better rather than more complicated. Her perspective was often different from his, and together they found solutions neither would have reached alone. The ranch itself was thriving. Cattle prices were good, and Isabella had made some smart investments that were paying off. He hired another hand to help with the increased work, and Delilah suggested they start keeping chickens for eggs and a larger vegetable garden to supplement what they bought in town. By the time spring arrived, the ranch felt truly prosperous, a far cry from the survival-focused operation it had been. In May, Delilah began to feel unwell in the mornings. At first, she thought she had eaten something that disagreed with her, but when the nausea persisted for more than a week, Isabella insisted she see the doctor in Glenrio. She protested that it was unnecessary, but he hitched up the wagon anyway, and they made the trip together. The doctor examined her privately, then called Isabella into the room with a broad smile on his face. "Congratulations, Mr. Tucker. Your wife is expecting a child." For a moment, Isabella could not process the words. Then their meaning hit him, and he looked at Delilah with wonder. She was smiling despite being pale, her hand pressed to her stomach. "We are having a baby?" he asked, needing to hear it confirmed. "Yes," she said, laughing at his stunned expression. "We are having a baby." The joy that filled him was unlike anything he had experienced. A child. Their child. The continuation of the life they were building together. He pulled Delilah into his arms carefully, as if she might break, which made her laugh harder. "I am not made of glass, Isabella. I am pregnant, not dying. I know, we are having a baby." "Yes, we established that." The ride home was filled with excited planning. They would need to convert the spare bedroom into a nursery. Delilah would need to take things easier as the pregnancy progressed. They would need to buy supplies, prepare for the changes a child would bring. Isabella found himself grinning so widely his face hurt, and Delilah was no better, her earlier nausea seemingly forgotten in the excitement. The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Delilah continued to feel sick in the mornings for another month, then it passed, and she bloomed with health. Her belly grew round, and Isabella found himself constantly amazed by the physical reality of the life they had created. He would place his hand on her stomach and feel the baby move, overwhelmed each time by the miracle of it. They prepared for the birth with both excitement and anxiety. Isabella arranged for Maria to come stay at the ranch for the last month of the pregnancy and for the first month after the birth, to help with cooking and cleaning so Delilah could rest. The doctor promised to come when the time came, and Isabella made sure his fastest horse was always saddled and ready to make the ride to town if needed. On a warm January night in 1885, Delilah woke Isabella in the dark hours before dawn. "It is time," she said, her voice calm but tight with pain. "The baby is coming." Isabella's calm shattered. He stumbled out of bed, pulling on clothes haphazardly, calling for Maria, running to ready the horse. Delilah had to physically grab his arm to slow him down. "Breathe, Isabella. We have time. First babies take hours. Send someone for the doctor, but do not panic." He tried to follow her advice, truly he did, but watching her labor as the sun rose was the hardest thing he had ever done. She was so strong, gritting her teeth through contractions that he could see hurt tremendously, but she never complained. Maria and the doctor, who arrived around noon, both assured him that everything was progressing normally. But Isabella felt helpless and terrified in a way that even cattle stampedes had never made him feel. Finally, as the sun began to set on that January day, his son was born. The baby's cry filled the house, loud and healthy, and Isabella felt tears streaming down his face. The doctor cleaned and checked the baby, then wrapped him in a soft blanket and handed him to Delilah, who looked exhausted but radiant. "Isabella, come meet your son," she said softly. He approached the bed as if in a dream, looking down at the tiny red face of his child. The baby had stopped crying and was looking around with unfocused eyes, one tiny fist waving in the air. Isabella reached out a finger, and the baby's hand closed around it with surprising strength. "He is perfect," Isabella whispered. "You are perfect. I cannot believe we made this." "We did," Delilah agreed, looking between her husband and her son with a love so powerful it seemed to light her from within. "What should we name him?" They had discussed names throughout the pregnancy, but now that the baby was real and in their arms, Isabella found himself reconsidering. He thought of his father, a good man who had died when Isabella was young. He thought of Delilah's father, who she still missed. He thought of the future this child represented. "What about James?" he suggested. "James Robert Tucker. James for your father, Robert for mine." Delilah smiled, tears spilling from her tired eyes. "James Robert Tucker. That is perfect. Hello, James. Welcome to your family." The first year of James's life flew by in a blur of sleepless nights and precious moments. Isabella discovered depths of love he had not known were possible, both for his son and for his wife, who amazed him daily with her strength and grace as a mother. They were exhausted and happy, their little family complete in ways that filled every corner of their lives with meaning. As James grew from infant to toddler, the ranch continued to prosper. Isabella expanded the herd and bought adjacent land, building something solid that he could pass down to his son someday. Delilah, when time allowed between caring for James and managing the household, started baking bread again, this time for pleasure rather than survival. She would sometimes make extra and give it to the ranch hands, who swore it was the best bread in New Mexico. When James was 2 years old, Delilah discovered she was pregnant again. This time the news came with less shock and more immediate joy. James would have a sibling, and their family would grow larger. The pregnancy was harder than the first, with Delilah more tired, and the demands of caring for a toddler making rest difficult. But Isabella and Maria, and even the ranch hands helped however they could, and they all made it through. Their daughter was born in the spring, coming faster than James had, as if eager to join the world. She had Delilah's dark hair, and they would discover her mother's honey-colored eyes. They named her Catherine Grace, Catherine for Isabella's mother, and Grace because the name felt right. With 2 children, the house felt full and alive in ways Isabella had never imagined when he built it as a lonely bachelor. Toys littered the floor, children's laughter echoed from the walls, and every day brought new challenges and joys. They added on to the house, building another bedroom and expanding the kitchen. The ranch continued to grow, and Isabella hired a foreman to handle more of the day-to-day operations so he could spend more time with his family. One evening, when James was 5 and Catherine was 3, the family sat together on the porch watching the sunset. The children were playing with wooden toys Isabella had carved for them, and Delilah sat in the rocking chair he had built when she was pregnant with James. Isabella stood leaning against a post, surveying his small kingdom with deep satisfaction. "You ever think about that day?" Delilah asked, her voice quiet enough not to disturb the children's play. "The day we met when you bought all my bread." Isabella looked at his wife, still as beautiful to him as she had been standing in that rain, though now there was peace in her face rather than desperate determination. "I think about it often, about how easily I might have ridden past, gone about my business, never known what I was missing. But you did not ride past. You stopped. You saw me." "I did, and it changed everything." Delilah stood and came to stand beside him, slipping her hand into his. They watched the sun sink toward the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant colors, their children playing safely nearby. "Sometimes I still cannot believe this is my life," she said. "That I get to wake up every morning here with you, with our children. That I am safe and secure and loved. It feels like a dream I might wake from." "It is real," Isabella assured her, squeezing her hand, "and it gets better every day." "How did I get so lucky?" "We both did. I was just a cowboy trying to escape the rain. You needed to sell bread. The universe put us in the same place at the same time and let the rest unfold. The universe and your kind heart. And your strength and courage, and the fact that you refused to give up even when giving up would have been easier." Catherine toddled over to them then, holding up a wooden horse for inspection. "Papa, look, horsey running." Isabella scooped her up, settling her on his hip. "That is a very fast horse. Is he running to anywhere special?" "Running home," Catherine declared. "To see his family." "That is the best reason to run," Isabella agreed. Meeting Delilah's eyes over their daughter's head, James joined them, wrapping his arms around Isabella's legs. "Tell us the story, Papa, about how you and Mama met." It had become a favorite bedtime story, though Isabella suspected both children liked it more for the drama of the rain and the romance of the gesture than for understanding what it really meant. Still, he indulged them, as he always did. "Well, it was a day much like any other, except it was raining hard in Glenrio. And I saw your mama standing in the street with a basket of bread, trying to sell it even though everyone else had gone inside. She looked so determined and brave that I knew I had to help her. So I bought all her bread, every single loaf." "And then you fell in love," Catherine exclaimed, as if this were the most exciting part. "Not quite that fast," Delilah corrected gently. "But your papa did give me hope when I badly needed it, and slowly we became friends and then we fell in love." "And then you got married and had us," James added, completing the story in the simplified way children understood it. "Exactly right," Isabella confirmed. "And now here we are all together, exactly as we are meant to be." As the children ran off to play a little longer before bedtime, Isabella and Delilah remained on the porch, hands still clasped, watching the last light fade from the sky. The air was cooling rapidly as desert nights did, and stars were beginning to appear overhead, the same stars that had witnessed their first kiss all those years ago. "Thank you," Delilah said suddenly. "For what?" "For seeing me. for stopping, for buying my bread and my coffee and my mother's medicine, for giving me a chance at a life I never thought I could have. Isabella turned to face her fully, cupping her face with his free hand. You gave me just as much, maybe more. You taught me that a full life is not measured in acres owned or cattle sold, but in moments like this, in love shared and family built, in having someone to come home to who is happy to see you. We saved each other, Delilah said simply. Yes, Isabella agreed. We did. They kissed then, a gentle kiss full of comfortable love and shared history, before calling the children inside for the evening. Life on the ranch continued with its rhythms and routines, seasons passing and children growing, but that evening remained etched in Isabella's memory as a perfect moment when he could see clearly how far they had come and how good the journey had been. Years continued to pass in that pleasant way time has when life is good. James grew tall and strong, fascinated by the ranch work and eager to learn everything his father could teach him. Catherine grew into a spirited girl with her mother's determination and her father's quiet strength. The ranch prospered, weather was generally kind, and the Tucker family became well respected in the community. When James was 10 and Catherine was 8, Delilah discovered she was pregnant once more. This pregnancy was unexpected but welcomed, though at 33, Delilah worried more than she had with the previous two. Isabella fussed over her endlessly, and the children were excited about having another sibling. The pregnancy went smoothly, and in the fall they welcomed another son, whom they named Thomas after Delilah's grandfather. Thomas was a happy baby who grew into a cheerful toddler, and his older siblings doted on him constantly. The house was chaotic and full of life, and Isabella had never been happier. He was 42 now, his hair showing gray at the temples and his body showing the wear of decades of hard physical work, but he felt young when surrounded by his family. Delilah, too, had aged gracefully into her mid-30s. The hardship lines that had marked her face when they met had softened into laugh lines. She was healthy and content, dividing her time between raising children and managing the household, occasionally helping with ranch business when her opinion was needed. One summer afternoon, when Thomas was about 4 years old, a visitor arrived at the ranch. Isabella was working with the horses in the corral when one of the hands told him someone was asking for Mrs. Tucker. Concerned, Isabella headed back to the house to find Delilah on the porch talking with a woman he did not recognize. As he approached, he could see the resemblance between the two women. They had the same dark hair, the same facial structure, though the visitor was older and more weathered. "Isabella," Delilah called out, her voice shaking with emotion. "This is my Aunt Margaret, my mother's sister." The woman turned to him, and Isabella saw tears on her cheeks. "Mr. Tucker, I apologize for arriving unannounced, but I had to come. I only recently learned that my sister passed away and that my niece was here." Isabella shook her hand, his mind racing. This was the aunt who had never responded to Delilah's letter years ago when her mother was sick. He felt a surge of anger on behalf of his wife, but kept it from his face. "You are welcome here," he said, because Delilah's happiness mattered more than his grudge. "Please, come inside." Over coffee at the kitchen table, with the children playing outside under the supervision of Maria, the aunt explained. She had been in Kansas, struggling through her own hardships with an abusive husband. The letter from Delilah had arrived, but her husband had hidden it, along with any other mail from her family. She had finally escaped that situation 2 years ago, and only recently, while going through old papers, had found the unopened letter. She had come as quickly as she could, hoping it was not too late to reconnect. Delilah listened with tears streaming down her face, years of hurt and abandonment finally explained. When her aunt finished, they embraced, both women crying openly. Isabella discreetly left them alone, understanding that they needed time to reconnect and heal old wounds. Margaret stayed at the ranch for 2 weeks, getting to know her niece's family and marveling at how well Delilah had done for herself, despite everything. She told stories about Delilah's mother as a young woman, shared family history that Delilah had never known, and became instantly beloved by the children, who had never had a great aunt before. When it came time for Margaret to leave, returning to her own small farm in Kansas, the goodbye was tearful but hopeful. They promised to write regularly and visit when possible. Delilah had family again, blood family beyond the one she had created, and the healing that brought was visible in her face. "I thought I had lost all connection to my past," Delilah told Isabella that night as they lay in bed. "But now I have Aunt Margaret, and she can tell the children about their grandmother and great-grandmother. It feels like a gift." "It is a gift," Isabella agreed. "And I am glad she came, even though part of me is still angry that she was not there when you needed her. She was trapped in her own nightmare. I cannot hold that against her. What matters is that she came now, that we have a chance to build a relationship going forward." Isabella pulled his wife closer, marveling as he often did at her capacity for forgiveness and hope. "You are a remarkable woman, Delilah Tucker." "I am a lucky woman," she corrected. "Lucky to have found you, lucky to have our children, lucky to have gotten this second chance with my aunt. All of it makes me believe that good things can still happen, even after terrible ones." The years continued their steady march. James turned 16, then 18, growing into a fine young man who loved the ranch as much as his father did. Catherine became a beautiful and intelligent young woman, interested in books and learning in a way that made Isabella proud and a little sad, knowing she would eventually want more than ranch life could offer. Thomas grew from toddler to boy, showing signs of being equally comfortable with horses and books, a combination of both his siblings' interests. The ranch itself had become one of the most successful in the region. Isabella had built something lasting, something he could pass down through generations. He had trained James to take over eventually, teaching him not just the practical aspects of ranching but the business side as well. Catherine helped with the bookkeeping, her neat hand and sharp mind making her invaluable for tracking expenses and income. On a warm October evening, 23 years after that rainy day in Glenrio when Isabella first saw Delilah selling bread, the family gathered on the expanded porch for Catherine's 18th birthday. James was 21 now, Thomas was 13, and Isabella and Delilah were 55 and 46, respectively. Friends and neighbors had come for the celebration, and the house rang with laughter and music. As the party wound down and guests began to leave, Isabella found himself standing in the same spot where he had stood so many evenings before, looking out at the land he had built his life on. Delilah joined him, slipping her arm through his in the comfortable way of long marriage. 23 years, she said, as if reading his thoughts. "Hard to believe, is it not?" "Best 23 years of my life," Isabella replied. "Mine too, though the first 23 were significantly more difficult." "Do you ever regret it?" "Taking a chance on a strange cowboy who bought too much bread," Delilah laughed, the sound rich and warm. "Not for a single moment. That strange cowboy gave me everything I have. This ranch, our children, a life I never dreamed possible. How could I regret any of it?" James approached them, a young woman on his arm that Isabella recognized as the daughter of a neighboring rancher. "Ma, Pa, can I talk to you for a minute?" They moved inside to the relative quiet of Isabella's study, and James stood there looking nervous in a way Isabella found amusing. His son was confident and capable in almost every situation, but whatever he wanted to say now clearly had him on edge. "I want to ask Mary to marry me," James said finally, the words coming out in a rush. "I know I am young, but I am ready. I love her, and I want to build a life with her the way you two did. I wanted your blessing before I asked her father." Isabella looked at Delilah, saw his own thoughts reflected in her face. Their son was indeed young, but he was also responsible and hardworking, and the love in his face when he looked at Mary was genuine. They had been younger when they married, though under different circumstances. "You have our blessing," Isabella said, "but are you sure you are ready for marriage? It is not always easy, even when you love someone." "I know, Pa, but Mary and we have talked about it. We want the same things. We want to build something together. Is that not what you and Ma did?" "It is," Delilah confirmed. "And if you are certain, then we support you completely." James's relief was palpable. He thanked them both, hugged them tightly, and hurried back outside to rejoin Mary. Isabella and Delilah remained in the study, suddenly aware that their children were growing up and away, that the next chapter of their lives was beginning. "He is so young," Delilah said softly. "We were younger," Isabella pointed out. "Yes, but we were desperate. He has choices we never had. And he is choosing love. I cannot fault him for that. It is what we taught him by example, if nothing else." James and Mary were married the following spring in a ceremony that was significantly larger and more elaborate than Isabella and Delilah's simple wedding had been. The whole community came out to celebrate, and the party lasted well into the night. The young couple moved into a house Isabella had built on the far edge of the ranch property, close enough to be part of the family operation, but far enough to have their own space. James continued to work the ranch alongside his father, learning more each year about running the entire operation. Catherine, meanwhile, announced that she wanted to become a teacher. Isabella arranged for her to attend normal school in Santa Fe, though it pained him to see her leave the ranch. She thrived there, however, sending letters home filled with enthusiasm for her studies and descriptions of city life that were both exciting and foreign to her family. When she graduated 2 years later, she returned to the area and took a position teaching at the school in Glenrio, choosing to live on the ranch and commute each day rather than board in town. Thomas, at 15, was still finding his path, but he showed promise in everything he tried. He worked the ranch with competence, if not quite his older brother's passion, and he loved books as much as Catherine did. Isabella suspected he might eventually want to attend university, something neither he nor Delilah had ever had the opportunity to do. If that was what Thomas wanted, Isabella would make it happen. His children would have every opportunity he could provide. As Isabella approached his 60th birthday, he began to think seriously about succession. James was more than capable of running the ranch, had proven it repeatedly over the years. It was time to start transitioning leadership, to let the younger generation take control while Isabella was still around to offer advice if needed. He discussed it with Delilah one evening as they sat together in their bedroom, a space that had been theirs for nearly a quarter-century now. "I am thinking of making James a full partner," he said. "Not just a hand or a foreman, but an equal owner. What do you think?" Delilah considered it carefully, as she always did before responding to important questions. "I think it is time. He has earned it, and he needs to feel that investment if he is truly going to commit his life to this place. What about the other children?" "Catherine has her teaching, and she seems happy with it. Thomas, I think we should set aside money for his education, wherever he wants to go, and they will both inherit equally when the time comes, but the day-to-day operation should go to James." That seems fair, Delilah agreed. Have you discussed it with them? Not yet. I wanted your thoughts first. We have always made big decisions together. She reached over and took his hand, their fingers interlacing automatically after so many years of the gesture. I love that about us. That after all this time you still ask my opinion, still value what I think. Of course I do. You are the smartest person I know and the best partner I could have asked for. None of this would exist without you. We built it together, Delilah said firmly. You gave me the foundation, the opportunity, but I helped build the rest. Together. Together, Isabella agreed. The transition went smoothly. James was honored and somewhat overwhelmed by the responsibility, but he rose to meet it. Within a year, he was handling most of the ranch operations, and Isabella found himself with more free time than he had had in decades. He used it to spend time with Delilah, taking trips into town just for the pleasure of it, visiting Catherine at the school where she taught, helping Thomas with whatever he was currently interested in. On one such trip into Glenrio, Isabella and Delilah found themselves walking past the spot where he had first seen her, where she had stood in the rain selling bread all those years ago. The town had grown and changed in the intervening years, but the basic geography remained the same. "Do you remember?" he asked, though he knew she did. "Every detail," Delilah replied. "I remember thinking you were either crazy or an angel buying all that bread. I remember being so cold and so tired and so scared about what would happen to Mother and me. And then you appeared, this solid, kind man who looked at me like I mattered. You did matter. You do matter." They stood together on that corner, elderly now by the standards of the time, but still healthy and strong, still deeply in love. People passed around them, some nodding greetings to the well-known rancher and his wife, others ignoring them completely. None of them knew the significance of this particular spot, the way it had changed two lives irrevocably. "I would do it all again," Isabella said quietly. "Every moment, every challenge, every joy, all of it, just to end up here with you." "As would I," Delilah agreed. "Even the hard parts, because they led to this, to us. To the life we built and the family we raised, I would change nothing." They walked on, hand in hand, through the town where their story had begun, heading home to the ranch where it had flourished. Behind them, the corner stood empty again, waiting perhaps for another rainy day and another chance meeting that would change everything for someone else. Years continued to pass in that gentle way they do when life has settled into comfortable rhythms. James and Mary had children of their own, making Isabella and Delilah grandparents. Catherine eventually met and married a merchant from a neighboring town, and they too started a family. Thomas, as Isabella had suspected, chose education over ranching and went east to attend university, though he always came home for visits and never lost his connection to the land he had been raised on. Isabella and Delilah grew old together with grace and gratitude. They watched their children and grandchildren flourish, saw the ranch continue to prosper under James's capable management, and enjoyed the peaceful contentment that comes from a life well lived. On their 30th wedding anniversary, Isabella organized a celebration at the ranch. All their children came, along with grandchildren and friends and neighbors. There was food and music and dancing, and at one point, Isabella stood to make a toast. "30 years ago," he began, his voice still strong though age had roughened it further, "I married the most remarkable woman I have ever known. She was selling bread in the rain when I met her, and I bought her entire basket. Best purchase I ever made." Laughter rippled through the crowd, though everyone there knew the story by heart. "What I did not know then," Isabella continued, "was that in buying that bread, I was also buying a chance at real happiness. Delilah gave me everything. She gave me a home when I only had a house. She gave me children and grandchildren. She gave me partnership and friendship and love that never wavered, even in our hardest times. She saved me from a life of loneliness that I did not even realize I was living. He turned to Delilah, who was sitting beside him with tears streaming down her face. Thank you for standing in that rain. Thank you for letting me help you. Thank you for building this life with me. You are my heart, Delilah Tucker, and I love you more now than I did on the day we married. Delilah stood, and they embraced while their family and friends applauded. When the noise died down, she spoke as well, her voice clear despite the emotion in it. Isabella claims I gave him everything, but he is wrong. We gave each other everything. He gave me hope when I had none. He gave me safety when I was vulnerable. He gave me love when I thought I would never have it. And together, we built something beautiful. This family, this ranch, this life, it is all a testament to what happens when two people choose love and commitment and partnership. I am grateful every day for that rainy afternoon in Glenrio, for the cowboy who saw me when others looked away, and for every moment since. They kissed to more applause and whistles from their grandchildren, and the party continued late into the night. It was a perfect celebration of a marriage that had weathered all storms and emerged stronger for them. Isabella lived to be 78 years old, dying peacefully in his sleep on a spring morning with Delilah beside him in the bed they had shared for 46 years. His passing was mourned by the entire community, but none grieved like Delilah, who had lost her partner, her best friend, her great love. But even in grief, she did not break. She was 89 years old and had lived a life beyond anything she could have imagined in those desperate days of her youth. She stayed on the ranch, surrounded by family, content to watch the next generations carry on what she and Isabella had built. On quiet evenings, she would sit on the porch in the rocking chair Isabella had made her so many years ago, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors. She would think about that rainy day, about the tall cowboy who had stopped when everyone else walked by, about the basket of bread that had changed everything. And she would smile, because she knew without doubt that she had been loved completely and had loved just as completely in return. Not every story got a happy ending, but theirs had been happy from that rain-soaked beginning all the way through to the peaceful end. They had built something real and lasting, not just in the ranch that still bore the Tucker name, but in the family they had raised and the love they had shared. Delilah lived 2 more years after Isabella passed, dying quietly in her sleep at 91, content and at peace. Her children laid her to rest beside Isabella in the family plot on the hill overlooking the ranch, where they could watch over the land they had built together for eternity. Their story became family legend, passed down through generations of Tuckers who farmed that land. Great-grandchildren and great-great-grandchildren would hear about the rainy day in Glenrio, about the basket of bread, about how sometimes love finds you when you least expect it and changes everything. The ranch still stands, still productive, still family-owned, a testament to what 2 people can build when they choose love and partnership and commitment. And on rainy days, when storms roll across the high plains of New Mexico, the Tucker descendants sometimes think of their ancestors, of Isabella who stopped when others walked by, and Delilah who never gave up even in the hardest times. They think about how a simple act of kindness can ripple through generations, creating family and legacy and love that never really dies. That is how the story ends, not with tragedy or loss, but with legacy and love that persisted beyond death. Isabella and Delilah Tucker built something that lasted, and their love story remained alive in every corner of the ranch they had made together, in every descendant who carried their blood, In every retelling of the tale of the cowboy who bought bread in the rain and won a heart in the process. It was a story of hope found in hopelessness, of love discovered in unlikely circumstances, of two people who found each other exactly when they both needed it most. It was a story of the Wild West, but more importantly, it was a love story, pure and simple. The best kind of love story, the kind that starts with a generous gesture and grows into a lifetime of partnership and devotion. And if anyone were to ask whether it was all worth it, whether one random act of kindness could really change everything, the answer would be written in the land itself, in the family that grew from that moment, in the decades of happiness that followed that rainy afternoon. Yes, it was worth it. Every moment, every challenge, every joy, all of it was worth it, because all of it was built on a foundation of genuine love, the kind of love that transforms lives and echoes through time.